By showing care and concern for our neighbors, we can make Singapore a better home for all. And I emphasize community ownership, as many members here did just now as well, because the effort has to come from ourselves. We can live peacefully together if we show consideration and learn how to give and take. And to this end, I agree with many members like Ms. Irene Ng and Mr. Hawazi Daipi that citizens should try to resolve their personal conflicts amicably amongst themselves. We have spoken to some stakeholders on managing community disputes. Many say that building strong neighborly ties can help to reduce conflict. If neighbors know one another, they will be more likely to broach issues sensitively and come to a consensus. Most of the people we consulted called for more public education efforts to encourage consideration and graciousness in our community. And we agree with them as well as with the suggestions from members to put more effort in this area. Because day-to-day acts of kindness will help to make our communities a more pleasant place to live. And indeed, every day there are many Singaporeans practicing good neighborliness and kindness in their communities, like Mrs. Chandra Sivarama Krishnan. You see her here in this picture. She has been there to help her elderly Chinese neighbor, Madam Aho, next to her in the picture. For 20 years, her neighbor can only converse in Chinese, but the language barrier has not stopped Mrs. Chandra from reaching out. And though they can only communicate through hand signals, Mrs. Chandra helps her neighbor with reading letters received in English, and she explains the contents as best as she can. She also checks on her neighbor regularly to make sure she's doing well. And once, when the electricity supply was cut off, she helped to ensure that the problem was fixed. And I think her story shows that kindness can go beyond the boundaries of race and language, and these are the acts of kindness we want to promote. So MCCY will continue to work closely with partner agencies like HDB and the Singapore Kindness Movement to encourage neighbors to get to know one another, to strengthen the kampong spirit in our urban city. At the same time, we recognize that there are some who need help resolving tensions with their neighbors. And it's sometimes useful to have a neutral party to help disputing parties communicate better. Grassroots leaders already undertake this role, and they do their best to informally mediate disputes between neighbors. Residents can also seek formal mediation at the Community Mediation Center, or the CMC. It has a fairly good success rate. Out of the 521 cases heard last year, about 70% were successfully resolved. And we believe that mediation continues to be a very important process as both parties agree on a solution so that there's ownership and responsibility to follow through. It also helps to preserve and mend relationships so that neighbors can continue living harmoniously alongside one another. So we also intend, as part of our enhanced framework, to increase the CMC's capacity and provide more mediation training to grassroots leaders. However, as several members have noted, we cannot compel people to go for mediation. Currently, 60% of the cases registered with the CMC do not turn up. There are also several difficult and long-standing cases that are initially resolved through mediation, but later flare up again. So several members spoke about this, of some of these very difficult cases and deadlock disputes. I share your concerns, and that's why we had earlier set up an interagency team involving my ministry together with MinLaw, MHA, MND, and the team has proposed several measures to strengthen our community dispute resolution framework. A key part of the framework is a community dispute resolution tribunal to adjudicate difficult cases between neighbors. The tribunal will have the powers to mandate mediation, to give parties a chance to communicate and compromise. The tribunal can also make judgments and issue orders which will have to be complied with, failing which there will be consequences, including prosecution. So the tribunal will provide legal recourse for difficult cases and especially for aggrieved parties. But I must qualify that the tribunal should neither be the first recourse nor the main way we resolve our disputes. This would be counterproductive. We want to promote a strong sense of community ownership and collective responsibility, and mediation should remain the first priority. I think Ms. Irene Ng also agreed with that, and several members as well. So we do want the tribunal to be there, but it should be there as a last resort for the difficult cases. For the tribunal to work well, we will require better frontline responses to community disputes and more effective enforcement capabilities. These are complex implementation issues which the relevant agencies are working through, and we will build these capabilities progressively, starting with a few estates, learning from the experience, and then scaling up over time. I think Mr. Vikram Nair also asked about the need for clear rules and penalties. As I mentioned earlier, our key thrust is on public education and mediation, but we recognize that there are cases which do require rules and penalties. And so we are also looking at legislative amendments, such as to the Miscellaneous Offences, Public Order and Nuisance Act, to allow the police to take enforcement action if needed. Ms. Irene Ng highlighted that some of the more difficult dispute cases may involve persons with mental health issues, and that we need to find different ways to tackle such cases. I agree with her, and we are looking into this as part of the Community Dispute Resolution Framework. But I would say that this is, in fact, a broader issue that requires further study into our mental health provisions, especially in the community. And again, here the relevant agencies are looking into this, namely MOH and MSF.